XPrize CEO Marcus Shingles. Please join us on stage.
Thank you.
All right.
So we're very lucky today when we're talking about the future of living, because we not only have a futurist in Thomas who deeply understands the way that cities work. I'm excited to pick your brain on that. We also have Marcus of XPrize, which is creating new funding models and support for just radical innovation that we haven't actually seen in a lot of other ways. So it's wonderful. I was wondering, actually, Thomas, if you could start us off. Because for myself, I have interest in this because I grew up in a really small farm town. Now I live in New York, which is the exact opposite of that. And this is the trend of the world, right? It's like everything's becoming much more urban, much more dense. And in that, I feel like we're losing a little bit of kind of our own community. And I'm curious how you feel about kind of the state of play in cities today.
Well, thank you. I guess the thing that matters the most is that we achieve a sustainable lifestyle for the many. And we've clearly failed at that so far. So we've created conditions of abundance for the few, and those are highly unsustainable. And then we've created conditions of scarcity for a large part of the world. Almost 3 billion people by the year 2040 are going to be in situations similar to favelas or townships or refugee camps. And that's obviously quite a difficult reality to face. So we need to rapidly accelerate the convergence of these two trends, let's say, of the abundance model and the scarcity model, so that they arrive at a point of a sustainable lifestyle. And what you were mentioning around your experience growing up in a small town, I mean, isn't that what we all want? To live in a village, in a place where we can recognize the faces that are around us. It's nice to have Facebook, it's nice to have some of the technology tools that we have, but at the same time, we need to create the relationships that we want to have, and housing and city planning should help that. So that's, I suppose, where I come from, is that I'm interested in seeing how technology can accelerate the community benefits and not only have sort of a linear experience of selling things like products, and cities are basically becoming products rather than places where people thrive.
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned city planning, and we're obviously not just talking about cities themselves, because it's housing for humans all across the world. But city planning is interesting because every year and during any election, politicians start to talk about, let's build more bridges, let's fix the roads, we'll fix the subway, all these things, but it always feels very incremental. So Marcus, that's something that I'm super fascinated about what you're doing with XPrize and the affordable housing XPrize that you're exploring right now. Like, how can we radically change the way that we think about how we live?
Yeah, I mean, we're doing a lot of research right now at XPrize focused on the future notion of housing and homes. So to have safe, affordable, and healthy homes. And with all the convergence of technologies we see, artificial intelligence, 3D printing, advanced robotics, biotechnology, even blockchain to hold title on property, how can we converge these technologies to completely transform the notion of having safe, affordable, and healthy homes? And what we've identified is there's a lot of market failure because there's a traditional industry that is dominant on that construction and that development and those permutations of what housing looks like. So what we're trying to do, actually with Thomas's help as an expert and advisor into the model, is what are the moonshots that we need to see happen in the next 10, 20 years that can completely transform the notion of homes, of housing. From the concepts of pro-struction, growing yourself homes, to genetic engineering of plant species,
I think
bacteria.
we should just go into that just a little bit more. So
yeah, I mean, the art of the possible on where we could go with what homes and housing looks like is quite a paradigm shift than probably our current notion of homes and housing. And we have to explore that. So at XPrize, as a nonprofit, we're focused on how do we create incentive competitions to create these moonshots that will take what might organically play out over decades. How do we bring that fast forward to happen in the next decade?
Yeah, and you're currently investigating kind of like what kind of attributes you're looking potentially for this XPrize, correct? So could you take us a little bit through the process of what you're looking for?
Yeah, this is the area where Thomas is collaborating with the XPrize Foundation. So in order to figure out what incentive competitions we create and launch out to the world, we try to put a roadmap in place. So we try to put strategy before that execution. And we do a research and we collect empirical data. And it's not just through a technological optimist point of view. We actually bring sociologists and anthropologists and others into the discussion to imagine that future. In 10 to 20 years, knowing that there are these technology breakthroughs and innovation that are on these exponential trends, how can we play into those exponential trends to bring the notion of homes and housing forward into this new realm of possibilities of how we think about that. Thomas has been an advisor into this, and we're about 7-8 months through a research project. Lowe's Home Improvement, the major retailer based U.S., Canada, they're actually funding and underwriting the research. And we expect it to be our roadmap for prizes that we launch in the next decade as it goes with housing.
Yeah, Thomas, I was wondering if you could share a little bit of your perspective on this. I mean, because I think housing hasn't changed all that much. You know, it's gotten more sustainable and more efficient, but it's usually a march of efficiency, which is pretty linear. And I'm curious what kind of major breakthroughs you're hoping for. Where does, you know, tech and like really futurist type of ideals come in?
Well, thank you. I think we need to sort of put it over a span of the next 30 years. There's certain things that we can really do now, and there are the two kind of categories of change. The first one is how you recycle the existing. And for example, I'm an investor in an early stage company that is developing new templates for taking existing brick, wood, and concrete and transform that into a product that has a similar quality to what we would expect in a passive house standard. So, you know, very high spec, and you know, this is now possible. So we don't have to bring materials from the other side of the world. We can, you know, basically use the existing material stock and kind of recycle it or upcycle it rather. So that's kind of one approach. You know, it's not necessarily high tech, by the way. It's more using technology cleverly. And on the other side is, you know, I'm very involved with the maker world. I run the leading kind of impact fab lab in the UK. And, you know, we were sort of experimenting with different architecture studios to see, you know, what can we do in terms of the construction process. So in China recently, they just, probably most of you know this in this room, but they managed to print a house in 24 hours, which is kind of a gold standard, if you want, for 3D printing homes now. And, you know, it's not just about 3D printing. The WikiHouse Foundation in the UK, for example, takes a parametric approach to building homes, where you can CNC mill wood, and you can sort of construct the houses and sort of you know, define the type of configuration that you want. And that's really interesting because, again, it's not really about very, very sophisticated technology. It will be actually creating more affordability. So houses would normally cost, you know, £200,000 in the UK. You could probably build a house for £50,000 that would be equivalent. So, you know, these are going to change over time. So that's just like, in the near term, digital fabrication and upcycling are really exciting. On the longer term, I would go back to biomimicry and bioengineering, where we could, you know, go into this pro-struction model where you can start to grow and elaborate, you know, matrices that can really sort of construct homes by themselves and in themselves have the component of sustainability that is lacking today. For example, there is a project that has right now stopped but might be rebooted to transform through microorganisms the way that the dunes are formed in the Sahara Desert to create troglodytic habitats for people who you know, have traditionally been you know, nomadic, or in the Sahel, where you have, you know, tremendous issues with population growth and scarcity of water. So these are kinds of models where, you know, we have to really think about how do we use that sort of advanced engineering at the same time as, you know, be really clever about the application.
I mean, that's fantastic. I think you actually kind of just blew my mind a little bit, so we have to put it back together. I mean, it's incredible, the potential that we have here. I think potential is probably really where we want to get, knowing the crowd that we have here, which based on the face I can see is clearly obviously very brilliant and eager to get involved in like making this a better world, right? So what is the opportunity that you're seeing? Like, where do we need to start investing? What do we need to start creating? And what are the minds that we need to start putting into places? I'm curious what you hope for and what you're looking for, where you see that coming.
Well, one of the, you know, we have a $20 million carbon XPrize right now. And so we launched this years ago, and it was crowdsourcing the world for any team that can take carbon out of a smokestack and turn it into usable product. And we're down to some of the final teams after years. And one of the teams, their whole business model is taking carbon and making construction equipment out of it to build homes. So, you know, how can we take innovation and technologies in different sectors, different industries, in that case, carbon capture, taking that and restructuring it into a usable product, in this case, building material. And so that's a real recycling sustainability model.
I mean, it's also a model that no one thought anyone would be able to pull off. It wasn't going to happen without that type of investment enterprise, and I think it's absolutely incredible the work you've done there. I mean, that's like a huge, huge success. If you haven't actually seen the Carbon XPrize, you absolutely need to check it out, because again, this is the beauty of this kind of model of saying we're going to go for a moonshot, and when you get there, here's your reward.
Yeah, another team in that Carbon XPrize is trying to create beer out of the carbon, so we'll see how that goes. But,
we hope
but yeah, I mean, that's the beauty is you have to realize there's so much technology that is being democratized down to an individual level that we haven't seen, even as a human species right now. We haven't seen that amount of propagation of innovation that can take place at such a individual level. And so whether you apply it to housing or education or healthcare, we do have a period in history right now we're going through where the citizens of the world can start to create solutions that solve our own problems. And so in this case with housing, yeah, the goal is let's get rapid experimentation among entrepreneurs out there on different permutations of how we completely disrupt the notion of homes and housing. Whether it's carbon using for construction or whether it's pro-struction techniques to actually grow homes. Floating cities, as sea levels rise along coastlines, we have to start thinking about that challenge. The refugee housing. And so sometimes the traditional industry in their core has too many antibodies that smother that innovation to allow them to think outside of the box on where to experiment. So what we're trying to do with Thomas's help is how can we generate a significant amount of experimentation with a lot of diversity so we get a lot of different permutations on the notion of how do we transform housing.
That's incredible. So,
I guess where I would like to see us go is a little bit like Wikipedia for learning. I think we need to create a kind of global library of building that will allow people in dire situations to take control of their destiny in a different way. And it goes from let's say, the unit, the home, to the block, to the city. And we need to create a vocabulary of construction that will allow us to leverage all the technologies that are coming online, be it the blockchain, be it artificial intelligence and machine learning to understand how we better use energy, etc. And sort of accompany people through care if they need that, through the robots that might be in our homes, with the sensor fleet that will be out and the whole IoT that's going to come into every single part of the house. All these things are going to be like Lego bricks. And until now, you've had an industry that's been curtailed by the process of planning. So at the top, the city level, you provide a planning framework within which architects operate under the demands of the commissioners. And then that is the process for building cities. And inevitably it trickles down to the way that we conceive of housing and that we conceive of the way that housing composes villages and neighborhoods, etc. And it's extremely rigid. So I wrote a book called The Recoded City, which is partly about participatory placemaking and how to create those relationships between people so that they can co-construct their reality. And I think that was the way that we were building cities before we had planning. We have to understand planning is a recent phenomenon. It's only been basically 200-300 years of legal frameworks, not much more. So we need to go back to that and unlock the potential of your self-capacity and the empowerment of individuals. Digital fabrication is going to allow people in the middle of Africa and nowhere to basically use the technologies that are the most advanced that we have here and break down the price point. So that's very exciting, and open source cities is really where I think we should be leaning. That's my my main hope, is that we achieve what we did with the internet, now with the Internet of Things and soon with the Internet of Cities.
That's beautiful. I mean, I think the good thing here is we know that there's a need and a desire, right? I mean, we feel disconnected, so we use Facebook, for better or worse. We have huge inefficiencies in the housing market, so we have Airbnb to use empty capacity. We're starting to slowly get smart grids online because there's huge inefficiencies there. I mean, so there's so many things at its core to what we need. I mean, housing and our living and community is core to everything. But we do need all of you to be coming up with more ideas of how we can actually reshape this to make it better. I think no matter how many innovations we have right now of app after app, it still feels like the same problems are there, which congestion, things are crowded, we feel disconnected, things are too expensive, all of that stuff. And yeah, I really just want to like put it to you, like to both of you, like what's the ideal world look like? What is the ideal city? I mean, what is your ideal housing situation? Or if we can make houses much more quickly and much more cheaply, what happens then?
Well, there's also trends that are independent of housing itself that are going to affect housing. So you have technologies like the Hyperloop. Elon Musk is working on the Boring Company. You have VTOL, vertical takeoff and landing technology for flying cars. That's an industry that's on the vergence right now. We just had a summit in Wyoming with the leaders of that industry.
Oh, whoa.
but all that will change the structure of homes and what it means to have a home and where you're going to have that home. You have the sharing economy. You mentioned Airbnb. There's couchsurfing.com, which is the poor man's version of Airbnb, I guess. You can sleep on someone's couch. But virtual reality and augmented reality technology will change the need to be proximity to work. Because if you can have a virtual experience where you work, then living in the center of the city next to the work doesn't become as important if you can have a virtual experience to work from anywhere. So whether it's virtual reality, augmented reality, new transportation technologies like Hyperloop, the Boring Company, VTOL, vertical takeoff and landing, the sharing economy, Airbnb, couch, all of those in convergence are going to create a different notion of just build out of infrastructure around cities, because it's going to become a much different model in terms of where you have to be in terms of proximity of people and work.
Yeah.
Well, I guess, I agree with everything Marcus has said. I think that's why I'm working with the XPrize. We're very aligned on how we see the future and how to facilitate it. One of the things that I'm the most interested in seeing, if you want what is your ideal community, we talk a lot about exponential technology. I think we need to talk about exponential communities. So basically empowering people, and the building stock should only be the consequence of what people want. And we each should define our niches of cultural sets, and with that, create the housing quality that we aspire to have, progressively integrating the technologies that come in. Right now, we're victims of the technology changes. We need to become, be one step ahead as communities to appropriately integrate it and not have a technology divide that will necessarily break up cities even more and fracture societies. So I think that this is where we need to go. And technology is the main partner, including AI. And but we need to be careful about how we do it so that we don't distance people who are currently not on the housing ladder in the way they should be.
It's beautiful, absolutely. So I think we're running out of time here, but I was wondering, Marcus, if you could tell us, when can we expect to hear something in the future about affordable housing XPrize?
Yeah, at XPrize right now, we're doing the research. We'll conclude the research. We actually had a lab in Boston yesterday with a group of architects and experts. Thomas was here, so he couldn't attend that. But Q1 of next year, we plan on publishing the research. Now remember, the research is more for XPrize internally to understand what are the moonshots we need to incentivize to transform in the next generation the concept of homes and housing, affordable, safe, and healthy homes. And specifically what we're looking at doing are creating moonshots where there's not going to be any moonshots. So we literally vet with partners. We ask private industry, we ask government, we ask other NGOs, are you going to focus on these moonshots? If not, XPrize will take them as a nonprofit, we'll put them out to the crowd and see if we can't crowdsource it a decade before organically you would see that innovation.
That's absolutely incredible. So it truly is. So what I love about both of you is not only both great ideas, but you're putting them to use. So I appreciate that, and I hope all of you do as well. So thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. And absolutely
Thank you.
wonderful.
Thanks.
So,
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.